Hello, I'm Lucy Gunawan, Head of Data Science at TIMI. Today, we're diving into global parameters within Anatella. We'll cover four main areas today. First, what is a global parameter and its practical uses? Second, how to set global parameters in Anatella. Third, how to use global parameters in Anatella. And fourth, transient global parameters. Let's start with global parameters and their practical uses. So, what is a global parameter? A global parameter is a variable that you can define once and then use throughout your entire Anatella graph. By default, a global parameter scope is limited to a single graph. However, you can also share global parameters across multiple graphs, enabling consistent project-wide settings. Later, we will cover how to set up these shared global parameters across several graphs, as this process requires additional steps. Using global parameters allow for easier management of common settings, value, or paths that need to be consistent across 1. Multiple parts of a single graph, or 2. Multiple graphs within a project. Some practical examples of use of global parameter. First one, global file path. Suppose you have multiple Anatella graphs that read data from the same directory. Instead of hard coding the file path in each graph, you can set a global parameter for the directory path. This makes it easy to update the path in one place if it changes. Second, database connection string. Use a global parameter for the database connection string in multiple transformation steps that connect to the database. Third, dynamic date parameters for reporting. Use a global parameter for the report date, which, for example, changes every month. Fourth, environment-specific configurations. Define different configuration for development, testing, and production environment. Fifth, API endpoint management. Use a global parameter for the API endpoint URL, which may change over time. Sixth, threshold values for alerts. Set threshold values for generating alerts when certain metrics exceed defined limits. Seventh, language localization. Use global parameter to support multiple languages in your report or output. Eighth, loop creation. Use global parameters to set up loops within your Anatella graph, which is useful for automating repetitive tasks or enabling iterative processing. Ninth, dynamic parameterized graph. Convert a simple static graph into a dynamic parameterized graph that changes behavior based on the parameters provided at runtime. This effectively turns your graph into a flexible function or procedure similar to those in programming language like C, R, JavaScript, or Python. Now that you know what a global parameter is and have seen some practical examples, let's dive into how to implement global parameters in Anatella. Let's begin by setting up a global parameter in Anatella. There are 5 main methods to do this. First, manually. Second, dynamically inside the graph. Third, from a general config file. Load parameters from an external configuration file to centralized setting. We'll see in more details these first 3 methods in this video. Fourth, from the command line. For users familiar with command line operations, global parameters can be set via command line arguments, allowing for flexibility in automating or scripting tasks. To learn more about this, see section 4.7.1 of the Anatella Quick Guide PDF, as this will not be covered in this video tutorial. Fifth, within a loop. Parameters can be adjusted dynamically within a loop to enable iterative processing or modification across loop cycles. We have a specific video dedicated to this topic, so click here to see the video. Now, let's explore its method in detail. To set up a global parameter manually, you need to access the global parameter dialog box in Anatella. Go to the top menu and select Edit and Graph Global Parameter. In this example, you will see that there are already two global parameters. DataDir, which is the global data directory with the value ddata, and env, which is the environment global parameters with the value dev. In this dialog box, you can 1. Add parameters. Click on the Add button to create a new parameter. 2. Remove parameters. Select a parameter and click on the Remove button to delete it, for example, the env global parameter. When you add a parameter, you'll see a row with first one. This checkbox indicates whether the parameter is transient or not. A transient parameter is temporary and does not get saved in the .anatella file when the graph is saved. For this example, leave this box unchecked. We will cover transient parameter in more detail later. Second, the name of the parameter, which you'll use to refer to it in your Anatella graph. Let's create a date global variable named dateReport. Third, the value assigned to the parameter. For the dateReport global parameter, you might want to set this to a date such as 2024/7/22. Fourth, optional notes or comments about the parameter, such as date for reporting, to help identify its purpose. Now we know how to add a global parameter from the dialog box, but how can we change it dynamically while Anatella is running? To add a global parameter dynamically, we use the Set Global Parameter box. Locate the Set Global Parameter box and place it on the canvas. This box needs an input table with multiple columns and a single row. If the table has more than one row, only the first row will be used, and any additional rows will be ignored. Each column in this row defines a different global parameter. The name of each column defines the name of the global parameter you're setting, and the content within each column provides the corresponding value for that parameter. This setup allows you to define multiple global parameters simultaneously. For example, let's set the dateReport global variable dynamically to today's date. First, add an inline table box, then add a calculator box and create a column named dateReport and set it to contain today's date. If you like a refresher on using the calculator box or handling date manipulation, be sure to check out our video tutorial which cover this topic in detail. Click here to watch it. Let's set our new variable dateReport to the string method type. In the extra parameters tab, click add_now as input variable and set the date format to year, month, day. Then, in the standard parameters tab, fill _now as in the calculation field. After setting this up, check the results to confirm that the dateReport column accurately displays today's date. Once verified, connect this calculator box to the Set Global Parameter box and run it. Finally, open the Global Parameters dialog box by navigating to Edit, Graph Global Parameter, then you should now see that the date report has been successfully updated with today's date. The Set Global Parameters box offers the flexibility to set multiple global parameters at once, making it easy to manage various project settings in a single step. Let's walk through the setup. First, place an inline table box on the canvas. Inside this table, create 3 columns: language, database server, and database name, and assign each column a corresponding value. Next, add the Set Global Parameters box and connect it to the inline table. Run the graph to initialize these settings. To confirm that the parameters were correctly set, open the Global Parameter dialog box by navigating to Edit Graph Global Parameter. You should now see the new global variable, which is language, database server, and database name, listed with their assigned values. The Set Global Parameters box can also set global parameter values that you retrieve from your database. To do this, perform a select query on your database that returns a table with 2 columns, names and values. In this table, the names column lists the global parameter names, while the values column provides the associated values. Use the transpose box to reshape the database table into format that is compatible with Set Global Parameter. Once transposed, connect it to the Set Global Parameter box and run the graph. This approach allows you to securely store sensitive data such as password in a centralized and protected database, giving you an additional layer of security for sensitive project parameters. Now, let's set up a global parameter from a config file. Create a new Anatella graph and place Get Parameters from File box on the canvas. By default, this box looks for a file named config.cfg. To create the config file, refer to the config file syntax section for guidance on defining global parameters. This file should be a simple text file where each row defines a global parameter in the following format: global parameter name equals to global parameter value. Using a text editor such as Notepad++, create a config file with the following text as example. Save this file as config.cfg. To ensure the parameters are loading correctly, open the global parameter dialog box in Anatella to confirm it's initially empty. Run the graph with Get Parameters from the file and then recheck the dialog box to see the newly loaded parameters. Simple, right? We'll see more examples of how to use the Get Parameters from File box later in this video. Click here if you like to jump ahead to that section. Now that we've covered setting global parameters manually, dynamically, and from a file, let's explore how to put them to use. In this video, I'll demonstrate the most common scenarios for using global parameters in Anatella. First, as an input variable for a filter box. Second, for data transformation in the calculator box. And third, as an output file name in output boxes. For example, write CSV, write Excel, write JSON, write GEL, write columnar GEL boxes. Fourth, to define global settings from a configuration file. Two additional common and useful applications of global parameters include passing values to loops and creating parameterized Anatella graph. We'll explore these topics in detail in separate video titled Loop in Anatella. Click here to watch this video. Let's start with explaining how to use a global parameter in the raw filter box. In this example, we have a sales transaction table with column for transaction ID, transaction date, and amount. Our goal is to filter this transaction by a specific cutoff date. First, create a global parameter by navigating to Edit, Graph Global Parameter. Click the Add button to create a new parameter. Name it to Cutoff Date and set the value to 2024-06-30. Next, drag and drop the filter box into your graph. Add transaction date as an input variable and be sure to uncheck the two-number checkbox. Then, in the filter expression field, enter the transaction date less than cutoff date. This expression uses the global parameter cutoff date to filter transaction. When we check the results, we'll see only the transaction that occurred before the specific cutoff date, effectively filtering by the parameter we set. Now, let's see how to use a global parameter in the calculator box. Suppose you want to aggregate the transaction amounts before and after the cutoff date. To do this, we'll use a global parameter in conjunction with the calculator box to create a new column indicating whether each transaction is before or after the cutoff date. Ensure that the cutoff date parameter is already defined. Then drag the calculator box onto your graph. Add transaction date as an input variable and create a new variable called status with a meta type of string. And remember to uncheck the two-number checkbox to treat the date as text. In the calculation field, enter the following expression. This expression checks whether each transaction date is before the cutoff date. If it is, the status column will display before cutoff. Otherwise, it will display after cutoff. Check the result and you should see a new status column with each transaction categorized accordingly. Finally, let's look at how to use a global parameter to dynamically define the output file name when exporting data to an Excel file. Ensure that the date report parameter is already defined. Then drag the right Excel box into your graph. In the output file name field, enter the following expression. Notice the first character at the beginning of this expression. This character is special. It's the magic character that tells Anatella that what follows isn't just a static file name, but an expression. Anatella interprets the expression using JavaScript, allowing you to create complex dynamic file names. It is important to remember that this magic character can be used almost anywhere in Anatella, making it possible to make nearly any parameter in any box dynamic. Now, let's check the generated file. You should see that the date report parameter has been successfully incorporated into the file name. Let's look at another example of using the magic character. Here, I've created a simple bar chart with a title that is currently set to histograms. Let's make this title dynamic. To do this, open the histogram box and set the plot title parameter to magic character, my histogram name. Now, the chart title is linked to the global parameter my histogram name. Let's quickly add this global parameter to our list of defined global parameters, assign it a value, in this case, count per marital status, and then run the box again. You'll see that the chart title updates dynamically. Easy, isn't it? This magic character approach allows almost any aspect of Anatella to be dynamic. For example, file names or file path for reading or writing files, directory to list and process, expression in filter rows, boxes, Excel sheet names, login and password for databases or cloud connections, and much more. In many large Anatella projects, you'll often see a setup like this. One of the first things you'll notice is that the get parameters from file box is typically the very first box executed in the project. This box is used to set global parameters that will be referenced throughout the project. These parameters typically include 1. The path to the data lake where all the data files for the project are stored. 2. Password needed to connect to various data sources required for the project. The project's current status, for example, release, pre-production, and definition, etc. Using the get parameters from filebox in this way provides centralized control. For example, if the data lake location changes, you only need to edit one configuration file, and the entire project will automatically update to the new path. Similarly, if analysts working on the project needs to adjust a few parameter values for their local setup, they can do so by editing their own configuration file. In this setup, the default config file contains the standard global parameter values that all analysts are expected to use, while my own config file includes any local modification needed to run the project on the analyst's specific machine. This approach allows each analyst to work independently while keeping the project-wide setting consistent and easy to manage. Let's take a look at how transient global parameters work and why they're useful for securing sensitive information. Start by creating a new Anatella file named globalparameter_transient.anatella. Create two new global parameters. One named username with the value Lucy and another named password with the value PR2 no pi. Save the Anatella file. An Anatella file is essentially an XML file. Open global parameter transient.anatella with Notepad++ to see that all global parameters, including your password, are visible in plain sight. Since you don't want your password exposed, you can make it a transient parameter. Go back to the Graph Global Parameter dialog box and check the transient checkbox next to the password parameter. Save the file and reopen it in Notepad++. Now, the password's value won't be visible anymore. Instead, the global parameter is marked as hidden equal to 1. This ensures that sensitive information like password remains secure, as transient parameters are never saved in the .anatella file. For convenience, you can also make a global parameter transient directly from the config CFG file. To do this, add an asterisk in front of the parameter name. Let's recreate the username and password global parameters from above using a config file. Open config.cfg and modify it to look like this. Now, load this configuration into the global parameters. You should see that the transient checkbox is checked for the global parameter password, meaning it's treated as transient when loaded, ensuring added security. For an extra layer of security, you can store the global parameter password as encrypted text. To do this, place an asterisk after the global parameter name instead of before it. In this example, the password is no longer in plain sight, it's encrypted. To generate the encrypted version of your password, go to the second parameter tab in the Get Parameters from File box, type your password and click on the Encrypt button. You can then paste using Ctrl-V the encrypted password into your config file. And there you have it, a comprehensive overview of global parameters in a nutella. By using global parameters, you can streamline data processing and maintain consistency across various boxes. In this video, we didn't dive into 3 advanced uses of global parameter. First, creating loop. Second, creating dynamic parameterized Anatella graph. And third, ensuring uniformity of global setting across multiple Anatella graph. These are essential techniques, so we've dedicated a video to explore them in depth. Click here to watch it. Thank you for joining me in this tutorial. If you have any question or would like more details on any of the topics we covered, feel free to leave a comment below. Your feedback is incredibly valuable to us, so if you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in more tutorial, insightful discussion and practical tips, please consider subscribing to our channel. See you next time!